Hey everyone, today I have another layout update. Progress on the layout visually is pretty slow, but I am making some small changes that I'm pretty happy with. I haven't made a lot of changes to this part of the layout. I'm pretty happy with how all the scenery looks here, but these two sidings I have been working on. I washed the two tracks here with a black wash of acrylic paint, and the goal was to get it to sort of match that switch right there, and so far I haven't succeeded, but I guess I might just need to sort of blend it into the switch because, well, that switch had already been stained from my previous layout. So yeah, I want that to look a little bit better, try to blend it in. There's a few spots on the layout where that's also the case, like this one piece of track here. Kind of annoying that the roadbed is a slightly darker shade, but I'll sort of blend this in, make this a little darker. I don't know, I'll see what I can do with that, but overall, that's just something I've been working on in terms of the track. I've been making some groundwork changes in this part of the layout. I applied some brown turf to this area, and then I applied some green turf to this area, and I put it over the tracks too, and in the gauge between the rails, just to sort of make these two tracks look a little overgrown. And I feel like I've succeeded in that. I also think it might be worth mentioning that I piled some ballast at the end of the track here, and I plan to add EOT lights here with a bumper, and I'm going to make those myself, so I'll talk about that a little bit later. For a while, whenever I looked at this whole area of the layout, I was sort of dissatisfied because it didn't have a lot of color to it. And as much as this layout is pretty industrial in its nature, I still think some actual natural ground cover is a good thing. So I wetted this whole area with some warm soapy water and then scraped off my ballast and put in a little bit of natural grassland here. I'm yet to put in the drier plants, but so far I'm pretty happy with this. I think it helps break up all of the gray over here. Case is the same with this strip of green here. I just wanted to add a little bit of color variation to this part of the layout. And in terms of plans, I'm still thinking about having a sort of warehouse over here. The cars that are parked here aren't indicative of any industry that I want to put here. I think I just want a generic building that can serve as some kind of distribution center. I need to make some platforms for it, and that should be fun. And I have a building in mind that I want to use for it that I'd put right over there. So that's a future project, possibly. And then over here, that track over there, which I've painted the roadbed completely black on and put brown flocking around, will eventually also have a foundation, and that's where an engine shed is going to be. And I've been considering making that siding an isolated block so I can park any engine I want on there and run things on the inner loop as well. These two sidings, I'm still not quite sure what I'm going to do with them. Maybe I'll put some kind of industry here, or maybe I'll just leave them as is. But for now, they're home to a couple of steam locomotives, and these are neat in the way that they have a manual reversing unit, and you can disable them by just going between forward and reverse, and you get stuck in neutral and these things can't move, so you can display them on a live track and they aren't going to go anywhere. Alright, I think I'm sort of stretching it in terms of scenery that I've done. I haven't really done a whole lot beyond that, if anything. So I'm going to turn my attention towards the ceiling to talk about lighting. Recently I've installed these xenon lights, which I got basically new at a consignment store, and they work fine and they illuminate pretty good, and they can actually get a pretty tasteful lighting effect once you turn off the fluorescent lights in the basement. And here they are in conjunction with the can lights in the back, and I do feel like they sort of illuminate spots on the layout. I think it looks a lot better in person, but overall, they really elevate the look of the layout. I'll go turn off the can lights. This is what it looks like with just the xenon lights, and I'm pretty happy with it. I think it looks a lot better in person than it does on camera, but I think the point is still gotten across on camera. So I just slapped these lights onto the ceiling tiles of the drop ceiling here and routed the wire through the drop ceiling. And I think it looks okay. Again, it's not at all a professional lighting job. I wouldn't keep these plugged in for too long, but I do think that they look good, and so far they've performed well. The most noticeable lighting feature in this video has been the fluorescent lights, which, as far as I can recall, over the 3 or 4 year history of this channel, only one of the lights down here has been working, and it's this one, and it's not even over the layout. So we tried some LED bulbs, and they didn't work. I guess they weren't compatible with the ballasts up there. So we ended up just getting more fluorescent lights, and it ended up working perfectly fine. And it's nice to have a little bit of a better lighting setup. I also think it's worth mentioning that I have LED strips up here for if I ever want to do a little bit of colored lighting. I recently added the second one, so now I can have dual color lighting, which is kind of fun. And while I put in the xenon lights, I also managed the cables going to the LED strips, so there's no wire hanging down on the wall over there. So I think that that looks rather good. Now that's more than enough of me rambling on about the room lighting. Now I want to talk about the electrical for the layout. It has undergone an extensive change. I might make little graphics and put them up on the screen to help you sort of understand what I'm talking about in terms of wiring without me having to get under the layout and show you. Because even though I tried to make it as organized as I could, it's still visually a rat's nest. So previously all the wiring on the layout was to the 4 feeder wires. And while that did its job, it really electrically didn't make a whole lot of sense. I had a separate ground wire for every single feeder, and that got messy pretty quick. So eventually I decided that it'd be appropriate to tear all that wiring out and replace it with a more sensible system. The first thing that I did was I instated a common ground across the entire layout. And I decided to go with a pretty thick gauge because, well, everything on this layout's going to run off of it. So I took a cheap extension cord and slit it in half, and I figured if it could questionably handle 120, it could definitely handle 20 with ease. So then the ground for all the feeder wires from the track was put into breaks in the insulation. The next thing I did was run 2 hot wires from both of the throttles on the transformer, and it was a pretty satisfying project to run everything off of a common ground. So that was all the wiring of the feeder wires to the track. The next order of business was wiring up all of the signals on the layout. Currently there are 4 signal heads that I plan to have illuminated. We have these 2 on this signal bridge, this yard exit signal on this gantry. Well, I guess I technically have 5 signal heads, but these will both show the same aspect. Which isn't super realistic, but what are you gonna do? I actually ended up having to rewire pretty much everything in this signal bridge, which was a pain, and it took longer than running all of the wire for the signals combined. But once I had gotten it together, it works fine, and it still holds up decent. I do need to paint over the wires, though, because I had to reroute them outside of the structure instead of inside like I did originally. But I'm still happy with it. I then installed this signal head on this gantry and ran the wire through it, out of it, under, and down into the ground here through a hole. And I'm planning on painting that, of course, so it's less conspicuous. And then I routed the 4 hot wires from the signal bridge under the tables and over here. I am very glad that I had the foresight to drill holes in the cross arms of my benchwork to thread the wiring. So far I've only had these 3 signals wired up. I'll eventually wire this one up later. The wires go through this hole, and then I have that all twist tied together to manage the cables a little bit better. And all the cables come down onto this bus bar, where then the hot is supplied from this control panel, or it's supplied through this control panel. It is powered by the 14-volt post on my transformer. This control panel was pretty easy to build. It's not super pretty or anything, but it definitely gets the job done, and it's better than what I had for my previous layout. This is the general on-off switch for the signals, and it's a little comical that I'm using this kind of switch, but it's fun. These two sets of switches are for the signal bridge, and then these are for the yard exit light. I eventually plan to mark everything here, but for now I know what I'm doing with this. Conveniently, there are 2 more spots on the bus bar for the MTH signal to be wired in, and I have plenty of extra bus bars for my growing electrical needs. There's already a couple of holes in the control panel for when I eventually add in more signals and whatnot, and there's plenty of space over here for other controls eventually. I have the transformer powered up, and I'm going to demonstrate some of the lighting here. Now let me flip that on. Let's say I want to switch the yard exit signal to red, this bottom aspect, and I want the signal bridge to display red for the outer loop and green for the inner loop. And well, the yard exit signal is on red, and the outer loop is red, and the inner loop is green. And if I ever want to flip these signals to the opposite aspects, that's no problem whatsoever. Just flip them both at the same time. And if you so desire, you can have the option to have both aspects on at once, or none of the aspects on at all. And we can kill the power here. And this whole thing, all the signals, don't have to be energized if the transformer's on, which is pretty convenient. As I said earlier, I eventually want to add EOT bumpers on the 5 sidings on the layout. But that will also require LED lights to be wired in, and I have the facilities to do that with my control panel. I plan to use this controller to turn those on and off. You may have noticed that this video's been a little more rambly and maybe a little incoherent, and that's because I am very tired and I've been a little busy the past few days, and I'll be getting a lot more busy in the next few weeks and possibly months. And I'm definitely not going to have as much spare time as I used to. So I feel like it'd be wise to put the channel on a little bit of a hiatus, or at least not try to obligate myself to make videos every once in a while. And by that I mean, if I get an idea for a video, I'll jot it down, but, you know, I won't actually execute it. And I don't know how long I'm gonna stop obligating myself to make things. It could be a couple weeks, it could be a couple months. I mean, I might make occasional shorts and whatnot, but long-form videos kind of like this, I'm probably gonna put on hold, because they're fun to make and I love making them and I love editing them and putting them out there and talking with you guys, but I feel like there's other things that I'd like to prioritize over making videos. So I really appreciate all of you tuning in and watching up until the very end of this video. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.